Picture awakening one dawn to a revelation that shatters the foundation of your existence. Every trial you have endured, every bodily affliction, every instance of bewilderment and agony originates from a singular, appalling verity, one for which you bear no blame. You come to comprehend that the quivering of your limbs, the labored draw of your breath, the fog enshrouding your mind, all derive from choices forged long before your conception. Your progenitors, compelled by a fervent zeal to safeguard the sanctity of their lineage, have consigned you to an existence of torment. You learn that your mother is your kin by blood, your father, your uncle, your grandmother, simultaneously your great-aunt. The ancestral lineage does not extend outward in branches but entwines upon itself like a strangled creeper, suffocating in its own embrace. You are not the offspring of affection, but of a meticulously orchestrated propagation aimed at perpetuating authority and fortune, heedless of the profound human toll. This is no mere tale of invention. Such was the grim actuality for innumerable women across the annals of history, ensnared in a labyrinth of hereditary fate they neither selected nor could evade. As we embark upon these obscured narratives of endurance and anguish, should you find fascination in unveiling the concealed verities of bygone eras, I invite you to express your appreciation by engaging with this presentation and subscribing for further explorations of this nature. Moreover, share in the discourse below, revealing from whence you join this journey. It astounds me that we converge here, traversing continents and epochs, united by an insatiable inquisitiveness toward the chronicles of yesteryear. To grasp the essence of these women's ordeals, we must first unravel the distorted rationale that birthed their afflictions. Across epochs, the sovereigns of Europe clung to the conviction that unions within their own kin would fortify their celestial mandate to govern. They perceived their noble essence as inherently superior to that of the populace, purer, more hallowed, divinely anointed. This custom proliferated to such an extent that, by the 16th century, the regal houses of Europe formed a vast, interwoven tapestry of relations, cousins wedding cousins, uncles binding with nieces, and siblings begetting progeny destined to command vast realms. What eluded their comprehension, what lay beyond their era's wisdom, was the engendering of a hereditary abyss that would reverberate across lineages. The Habsburg dynasty of Austria and Spain elevated this perilous pursuit to a form of ruinous mastery. Their creed could aptly be rendered as, "Let others engage in conflict. Thou, felicitous Austria, shalt Wednesday." Yet these alliances were far from felicitous. They constituted deliberate hereditary calamities, yielding some of history's most poignant casualties. Our inaugural chronicle transports us to Vienna in the year 1634. Within the dim-lit passages of the Hofburg Palace, an infant emerges into existence, fated never to experience a single day unmarred by torment. Maria Anna of Austria arrives, bearing the Habsburg malediction etched indelibly into her very constitution, the culmination of successive kin unions, a genealogical snare akin to a tightening garrote. From her nascent recollections, Maria Anna perceives her divergence from peers. As other youths frolic with abandon, she grapples with mere ambulation. Her vertebral column arcs aberrantly, compelling her into a stooped carriage that impedes respiration. Her mandible extends so markedly that partaking of firm sustenance proves arduous. Attendants are compelled to mince her victuals into minuscule fragments, rendering repasts a laborious ritual of deliberate mastication and vigilant deglutition. Yet Maria Anna's corporeal tribulations diminish in comparison to the psychic anguish of discerning the genesis of her woes. She matures amidst galleries of ancestral likenesses, wherein each depicted countenance mirrors her own malformations. Behold, an uncle afflicted with identical mandibular protrusion, yonder a grandmother burdened by a comparable spinal curvature. With the piercing acuity born solely of adversity, she apprehends that her plight is not singular. She embodies the most recent casualty in an extended succession of hereditary devastation. The palatial healers, armed with phlebotomy and invocations, proffer no succor. They murmur amongst themselves of the Habsburg affliction, yet withhold such discourse from her earshot. To her visage, they allude to enigmatic maladies and the divine decree, eschewing the admission of the evident truth. Her torment arises directly from her forebears' fixation upon maintaining unadulterated dissent. Maria Anna passes her hours in subdued chambers, draperies sealed to veil her from the external realm and the realm from her. She cultivates an avid devotion to literature, her acute intellect emerging as one of the scarce faculties unhindered by her form. Within tomes, she unearths realms where lineage holds no sway, where bonds form from ardor rather than pedigree, where progeny arrive unburdened by the transgressions of their progenitors inscribed in their marrow. Nevertheless, veracity invariably encroaches. Royal medics scrutinize her periodically, cataloguing her anomalies with dispassionate exactitude. They quantify the arch of her dorsum, the extension of her mandible, the debility of her extremities. She transmutes from an individual into a specimen, a breathing testament to hereditary aberration. The solitude eclipses even the bodily torment. Prospective consorts, all kin by blood, recoil upon beholding her. Matrimonial deliberations commence and conclude abruptly upon disclosure of her state. She lingers unwed, not through volition but exigency. In an epoch where kin unions prevail, her disfigurements prove too egregious to disregard. Maria Anna succumbs prematurely at the age of 32, her frame yielding at last to the amassed burden of hereditary impairment. Her demise record enumerates sundry infirmities, yet the authentic etiology remains unscribed. She perished because her antecedents elected dominion over benevolence, sanctity over empathy. From the Austrian domains, our narrative shifts to the Iberian Peninsula, to arguably the most lamentable persona in this somber mosaic. Joanna of Castile, enshrined in lore as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad. Born in 1479 to Isabella and Ferdinand, the devout sovereigns who banished Jews and Muslims from their realm and patronized Columbus's expeditions, Joanna appeared ordained for eminence. Instead, she evolved into an admonitory parable regarding the toll of lineage preservation. Joanna's derangement did not manifest in juvenescence. She exhibited erudition, scholarly attainment, and proficiency in diverse tongues. Yet the kernels of her downfall resided latent within her heredity. Her progenitors were kin, enmeshed in the identical labyrinthine network of European nobility that had interwed for eras. Initial omens surfaced post her nuptials to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy. This alliance, contrived to bolster geopolitical bonds, devolved into a theatre of mental strife. Philip proved faithless, aloof, and domineering. Joanna's rejoinder was a fervent, possessive devotion that contemporaries construed as lunacy. But was it veritable insanity, or the innate retort of a female ensnared in an untenable predicament? Reared to regard matrimony as her paramount vocation and heir production as her sanctified obligation, when that union metamorphosed into a fount of perpetual degradation and sorrow, her psyche splintered beneath the duress. The authentic catastrophe commenced upon Philip's abrupt demise in 1506. Joanna's lamentation transmuted into a profounder, more compulsive shadow. She rebuffed his interment, traversing Spain with his sarcophagus, unsealing it recurrently to bestow kisses upon his decaying form. The tableau is macabre, yet it articulates a deeper veracity concerning her affliction. She had endured such profound seclusion, bereft of authentic interpersonal bonds, that even mortality could not sever her tether to the sole individual who had proffered regard, albeit laced with cruelty. Her sire Ferdinand, and subsequently her offspring Charles V, exploited her purported derangement to incarcerate her. For 46 years, Joanna dwelt in seclusion within the regal cloister of Santa Clara in Tordesillas. The environs were abysmal, confined to shadowed, frigid quarters, allotted scant nourishment, deprived of rudimentary sanitation. Her custodians chronicled that she would abstain from ablution for weeks, rend her garments to tatters, and wail incessantly for extended durations. Yet herein lies the pivotal inquiry. Was Joanna genuinely deranged, or propelled toward derangement by her milieu? Contemporary chroniclers increasingly posit that her lunacy was predominantly contrived, a expedient pretext to divest a rightful monarch of authority. Her conduct, albeit extravagant, may be interpreted as the organic reaction of one grappling with profound melancholy, trepidation, and post-traumatic affliction, intensified by decades of estrangement and maltreatment. The hereditary element demands acknowledgement. Joanna's lineage evinces unequivocal motifs of psychic maladies, despondency, and apprehension afflictions amplified and aggravated through consanguinity. Her great-grandmother endured analogous paroxysms. Her progeny Catherine would later manifest indications of acute despondency. The archetype was manifest to any disposed to perceive it. Joanna expired in 1555, yet immured, yet formally adjudged mad. Her passing elicited scant notice. She had been expunged from communal recollection ages prior, dismissed as an inconvenient lunatic, rather than recognized as a casualty of a regime that esteemed geopolitical expedience above human benevolence. Our subsequent chronicle unfurls amid the resplendent chambers of the Spanish tribunal, where a youthful maiden named Margaret Theresa shoulders the onus of sovereignty upon her delicate frame. Born in 1651, she is the progeny of Philip IV of Spain and his niece Mariana of Austria. Indeed, his niece, for by this juncture, the Habsburg kin had grown so endogamous that avuncular unions with siblings' offspring were deemed commonplace, unremarkable. Margaret Theresa's juvenescence is immortalized with exquisite fidelity through the canvases of Diego Velázquez, the court's preeminent artist. In these opuses, we behold a child who ought to engage in playful diversions, yet is attired in ornate regal vestments. Her diminutive countenance already betrays the hallmark stigmata of Habsburg hereditary impairment. Examine Velázquez's depictions with scrutiny, and you shall discern what the artisan, through tact, refrained from accentuating yet, through integrity, declined to conceal utterly. Margaret Theresa's mandible juts subtly, sufficient to presage the grievous malformations that would intensify with maturity. Her gaze harbors a remote, nigh vacant essence, indicative of cognitive retardation. Her stance, even in infancy, intimates the vertebral afflictions that beset her lineage. Yet the most poignant facet of Margaret Theresa's saga transcends her somatic state. It is her utter deprivation of autonomy over her destiny. From nativity, every decree concerning her trajectory is rendered by males who perceive her not as a sentient being, but as a diplomatic instrument. She is betrothed to her uncle Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, whilst yet a mere toddler. The espousal is heralded throughout Europe as a statesmanlike victory, with none pausing to contemplate its implications for the innocent at its core. Margaret Theresa matures cognizant that her sole vocation is to wed her uncle and engender successors to perpetuate the Habsburg succession. She acquires the superlative tutelage accessible to females of her epoch: mastery of tongues, proficiency in melody, grace in terpsichore and artistry. However, these attainments are esteemed solely as embellishments to render her a more alluring consort to her avuncular spouse. The nuptials transpire in 1666, when Margaret Theresa attains but 15 summers. Leopold, at 26, possesses the years of a paternal figure and is veritably her sire's sibling. The rite is commemorated with lavish observances and communal jubilations. For Margaret Theresa, though, it signifies the termination of whatever vestige of juvenility remained. The corporeal verities of her union are alluded to in tribunal annals, yet never delineated explicitly. Margaret Theresa is anticipated to conceive forthwith, notwithstanding her tender years and fragile vitality. The exigency is colossal. The perpetuation of the Habsburg realm hinges upon her capacity to yield robust successors. She conceives repeatedly, yet the outcomes prove calamitous. Her inaugural offspring, a female, endures mere months. Her subsequent gestation culminates in abortion. When she ultimately delivers a male who outlives infancy, the court's alleviation is tangible until it dawns that the infant has inherited the comprehensive array of Habsburg hereditary woes. Margaret Theresa herself diminishes with each parturition. The amalgamation of consanguinity-induced ailments and the somatic exertion of incessant procreation exacts a dire levy upon her physique. She endures what contemporary practitioners would diagnose as profound anemia, pulmonary distress, and conceivably epilepsy. Tribunal healers chronicle her deterioration with meticulous accuracy, her escalating impediments in articulation, her recurrent convulsions, her incapacity to retain sustenance. Yet they forego linking these manifestations to the patent origin, the hereditary devastation wrought by eras of endogamy. Margaret Theresa perishes in 1673, merely 6 years post-nuptials, at 21. Formal ledgers attribute her demise to pyrexia, but the actuality is that her corpus capitulated beneath the cumulative encumbrance of genetic flaws and somatic ordeal. Her passing is lamented across the dominion, albeit for misguided motives. Courtiers and envoys bemoan the forfeiture of a prospective fount of heirs, not the calamity of a youthful female whose existence was immolated to safeguard a lineage already irreparably tainted. Our odyssey now conveys us to the opulent precincts of Versailles, where, concealed behind ornate rituals and majestic edifices, a Spanish princess named Anna of Austria contends with the veiled repercussions of her Habsburg legacy. Born in 1601, she is the issue of Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, yet another avuncular-niece conjunction deemed not merely conventional but advantageous amongst European nobility. Anna's nascent existence in Madrid adheres to the archetypal schema of regal consanguineous ramifications. She progresses languidly in childhood, manifesting the emblematic scholastic impediments that afflicted myriad Habsburg scions. Her mandible protrudes conspicuously, rendering locution laborious and repast protracted. But perchance most sorrowfully, she displays indications of what contemporary medicine would identify as acute trepidation and despondency, maladies that render her quotidian existence an unremitting contest. In 1615, at 14, Anna is wed to Louis XIII of France as component of an intricate diplomatic compact. The bond is intended to solidify amity betwixt Spain and France, erstwhile adversaries across decades. What escapes consideration is the psychic repercussion upon Anna herself. She is wrenched from all familiarity and propelled into an alien tribunal, where adaptation to novel mores, idiom, and queenship is demanded instantaneously. The Gallic court initially receives her with sumptuous galas, yet the harshness of her circumstance swiftly materializes. Louis XIII emerges as a reserved, estranged consort, evincing scant regard for his juvenile bride. He grapples with his own psychic tribulations. Contemporary scholars surmise he endured profound despondency and potential homosexuality in a period when such sentiments could neither be avowed nor pursued. Anna discovers herself ensnared betwixt dual unattainable imperatives. As France's sovereign consort, she must engender male successors to assure the lineage. Yet as a Habsburg, she harbors hereditary anomalies that render salubrious procreation exceedingly arduous. Her initial gestations terminate in abortion or neonatal demise, each forfeiture augmenting her melancholy and apprehension. The court's healers, adhering to epochal medical tenets, impute culpability to Anna for these lapses. They impose upon her increasingly agonizing and demeaning regimens, venesection, catharsis, eccentric alimentary constraints. They inspect her intimate regions routinely, questing for evidences of what they term imperfections in her womanly essence. None contemplates that the quandary might reside in the hereditary endowment bequeathed by generations of kin unions. Anna's seclusion intensifies as annals elapse sans enduring heir. She becomes fodder for tribunal calumny and machinations. Aristocrats murmur of her malediction, of divine disapprobation toward the Iberian alliance, of France's necessity for a novel queen. The duress escalates to such magnitude that Anna begins evincing symptoms of what contemporary medicine would classify as acute agoraphobia. She dreads public emergence, sequestering herself for protracted intervals within her private sanctums. Her rapport with Louis XIII degenerates further, as both ascribe fault to the other for their barrenness. They commence leading virtually segregated existences, converging solely when protocol mandates. Anna seeks refuge in piety, devoting hours to supplication and cultivating an almost fanatical adherence to Catholic liturgy. The prodigy, when it materializes, appears nigh miraculous. After 23 years of wedlock, Anna delivers a robust son, the prospective Louis XIV, the Sun King. The nativity is extolled throughout France as an omen of celestial benevolence. For Anna, it embodies both victory and rekindled dread. She recognizes her chief merit lies in heir production, and now confronts the imperative to replicate this feat. A secondary son, Philippe, arrives 2 years hence, fortifying the succession and at last affording Anna respite from incessant exigency. Yet the somatic and affective levy of her protracted ordeals cannot be effaced. Anna persists as a profoundly apprehensive, despondent female who derives scant delight even from her eventual maternal triumph. Her twilight years are characterized by escalating corporeal ailments, gastrointestinal woes, respiratory impediments, and what court medics term melancholic seizures that confine her to repose for days. Contemporary scrutiny of her symptoms intimates she endured the anxiety syndromes and despondency endemic to Habsburg lineages. Aggravated by the trauma of her premature matrimonial encounters, Anna departs this world in 1666, having survived her consort and witnessed her offspring ascend as one of Europe's mightiest rulers. Yet her bequest transcends the geopolitical triumphs lauded in chronicles. It encompasses the human expenditure of a regime that regarded females as mere propagators and disregarded the hereditary ramifications of dynastic bonds. Though Marie Antoinette is chiefly commemorated for her involvement in the French Revolution, her narrative intertwines profoundly with the Habsburg custom of endogamy and its sequelae. Born in 1755, she was the progeny of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria and Francis I, Holy Roman Emperor, a union, whilst not as intimately consanguineous as certain Habsburg pairings, nonetheless bore the genetic imprint of centuries of kin marriages. Marie Antoinette arrived in France in 1770 as a 14-year-old bride, laden not solely with the aspirations of the Austro-French Pact, but also the concealed encumbrance of Habsburg hereditary baggage. Her renowned depictions by artisans such as Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun portray a comely figure, yet they also unveil subtle indicia of familial characteristics: the marginally extended lower lip, the distinctive Habsburg mandibular contour that had grown more accentuated across successive endogamous generations. However, Marie Antoinette's veritable tribulations were not forthwith apparent. Akin to numerous Habsburg descendants, she endured what court healers described as feminine afflictions, acute menstrual irregularities, recurrent abortions, and what contemporary medicine would diagnose as endocrine disequilibria, probably engendered by hereditary elements. Her union with the prospective Louis XVI was fraught from inception, though not in the manner conjectured by scandalmongers. Both adolescents contended with their respective hereditary legacies. Louis XVI exhibited manifestations of maturational retardation and interpersonal clumsiness that rendered intimacy challenging. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette wrestled with the apprehension and despondency that had tormented Habsburg females for ages. The imperative to beget an heir was monumental. For 7 years, the matrimony remained unfulfilled, inciting malicious speculations concerning both. Court medics appraised Marie Antoinette habitually, seeking somatic rationales for the duo's infertility. What escaped their grasp was that both contended with psychic and potentially corporeal issues deriving from their endogamous ancestry. Upon Marie Antoinette's éventuelle conception, her adversity persisted. Her premier gestation was beset by intense matutinal malaise, paroxysms of anxiety, and what modern healers would term antenatal despondency. Her daughter, Marie-Thérèse, emerged salubrious, yet ensuing gestations were punctuated by abortions and neonatal fatalities that inflicted grievous psychic scars. The most lamentable dimension of Marie Antoinette's chronicle is how her hereditary endowment intersected with the cataclysmic upheaval of the French Revolution. Her apprehension and despondency, conceivably intensified by endogamy-associated hormonal anomalies, impeded her navigation of the intricate geopolitical maelstrom enveloping her. Her propensity for impetuous resolutions and effective eruptions, traits perhaps manageable in a steadfast political milieu, proved lethal deficiencies as France plummeted into insurrection. Tribunal witnesses documented her mounting erraticism as the crisis deepened. She oscillated betwixt phases of frenzied endeavor and profound melancholy, incapable of sustaining the steadfast political discernment the exigency required. Contemporary chroniclers deliberate whether these oscillations were wholly situational or mirrored latent psychiatric afflictions prevalent in Habsburg lineages. The infamous utterance, "Let them eat cake," which she likely never voiced, exemplifies how adversaries exploited what might have been symptoms of hereditary psychic maladies to depict her as indifferent and detached. Her authentic calamity was not insensitivity, but its antithesis. She was inundated by ambient affliction and deficient in the psychic mechanisms to endure efficaciously. Throughout her captivity and adjudication, Marie Antoinette exhibited extraordinary fortitude, yet also indicia of the dissociative episodes that had afflicted other Habsburg females amid acute duress. Sentinels noted her intervals of evident disorientation, her struggles in concentrating during inquisitions, and her inclination to withdraw inwardly when confronted with insurmountable pressure. Her guillotining in 1793 concluded not merely an existence, but a hereditary strain that had molded European annals for centuries. In her terminal instance, she purportedly evinced the poise that had ever been her paramount virtue, alongside the acquiescence of one who had never wholly fathomed the origins of her life's adversities. To apprehend the magnitude of the Habsburg hereditary tragedy in its entirety, we must scrutinize not isolated females, but whole cohorts ravaged by endogamous practices. The Spanish Infantas of the late 17th and early 18th centuries epitomize perhaps the most intensified exemplification of hereditary cataclysm in European regal law. These were the daughters and granddaughters of Charles II of Spain. He himself was so profoundly endogamous that his coefficient of inbreeding gauging parental consanguinity surpassed that of progeny from fraternal unions. Charles II was sterile, epileptic, and conceivably cognitively impaired, the terminal culmination of 16 generations of Habsburg consanguinity. Yet Charles II's sisters and female kin, the Infantas, endured perchance more acutely than he, for they were anticipated to wed and procreate. Their chronicles resemble clinical dossiers on the ramifications of genetic seclusion. Maria Margherita, born in 1651, displayed acute maturational retardation from infancy. Tribunal archives portray a child incapable of articulate speech until 7, beset by locomotor difficulties, and evincing signs of what contemporary medicine would classify as autism spectrum conditions. Nonetheless, she was deemed matrimonial viable, owing to her regal essence. Her sibling, Maria Theresa, manifested divergent yet equally poignant symptoms. She was afflicted with what court healers termed the falling malady, undoubtedly epilepsy, and harbored such acute pulmonary woes that ascending stairways proved nigh impossible. Her mandible was so misshapen that she subsisted solely on fluid nourishment, and her dorsum arched to such extremity that upright posture necessitated bracing. These females matured within Madrid's Alcazar, an edifice that had transmogrified from regal abode into infirmary. Cadres of medics, surgeons, and clerics ministered to the assorted royal progeny, all manifesting variant expressions of the identical underlying hereditary apocalypse. The palace dossiers from this era resemble a treatise on endogamy's sequelae: epilepsy, maturational impediments, somatic malformations, immunologic collapses, and psychic disorders. Yet amid their torment, these females were compelled to discharge their cardinal regal duty: heir generation. Matrimonial parleys proceeded notwithstanding their patent incapacity for parturition. European tribunals received exhaustive medical expositions on their states, not from solicitude for their well-being, but to appraise their utility as propagative assets. Maria Margherita was ultimately espoused to her kin Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, the identical sovereign previously wed to Margaret Theresa. The union proved calamitous ab initio. Maria Margherita's maturational deficits rendered comprehension of conjugal obligations infeasible, whilst her somatic woes rendered fulfillment exceedingly arduous. The psychic torment of these compacts defies overstatement. These females matured cognizant that their sole merit resided in procreative capacity, yet their hereditary bequest rendered salubrious parturition nigh unattainable. They dwelt with perpetual dread of conception, aware that each inception imperiled not solely their existences but would probably yield offspring more impaired than themselves. Tribunal archives from this interval unveil the human toll in poignant fidelity. Epistles amongst regal females delineate abortions, neonatal demises, and the incessant trepidation accompanying each gestation. They recount progeny born so malformed as to be inviable ex utero, infants enduring mere days or weeks ere succumbing to hereditary anomalies. The psychic repercussions were shattering. Many cultivated what contemporary psychiatry would diagnose as acute anxiety syndromes, despondency, and post-traumatic distress. They grew hermetic, averse to public exposure, mortified by their visage and their lapses as consorts and matriarchs. Perchance most sorrowfully, they frequently imputed fault to themselves for heir production failures. The hereditary erudition that would elucidate their plight lay centuries distant. Thus, they construed their struggles as personal deficiencies or celestial retribution. This self-reproach superimposed an additional stratum of anguish upon lives already beleaguered by somatic and affective pain. To wholly comprehend these females' chronicles, we must probe the hereditary science underpinning their torment. When proximate kin procreate, their issue face heightened peril of inheriting dual copies of deleterious recessive alleles. In a salubrious, genetically heterogeneous populace, such noxious alleles are typically obscured by benign variants from unrelated progenitors. But when kin wed kin across successive eras, as the Habsburgs did for centuries, deleterious alleles amass and intensify. each cohort grows more prone to manifesting genetic maladies that would ordinarily remain latent. This phenomenon, termed inbreeding depression, impinges not merely upon somatic attributes but also psychic well-being, immunologic efficacy, and fecundity. The Habsburg mandibular prognathism stands as one of the most conspicuous illustrations of this genetic accrual. This characteristic amplified across generations of consanguinity, ultimately becoming so acute that certain Habsburg scions could neither occlude their orifices nor masticate solid fare. Yet the overt malformations constituted merely the superficial manifestation. Contemporary genetic scrutiny posits that Habsburg descendants also endured elevated incidences of epilepsy, cognitive impairments, anxiety syndromes, despondency, and immunologic inadequacies. Many enigmatic ailments besetting regal females were probable autoimmune disorders stemming from hereditary impairment. The fecundity dilemmas afflicting myriad Habsburg females are likewise explicable genetically. Consanguinity heightens genetic incompatibilities that render conception arduous and gestation perilous. The lofty rates of abortion and neonatal mortality in Habsburg lineages stemmed not solely from medical nescience, but as the inexorable outcome of hereditary damage accruing over epochs. Perchance, most lamentably, the psychic woes besetting females like Joanna of Castile and Marie Antoinette may be construed as hereditary susceptibilities to mental maladies activated by environmental duress. These females were not innately deranged. They possessed genetic vulnerabilities to apprehension and despondency, conditions then amplified by the insupportable exigencies of their regal stations. What renders these chronicles yet more poignant is how the regime self-perpetuated notwithstanding patent evidence of its deleterious impacts. Regal tribunals maintained voluminous dossiers chronicling the ailments plaguing endogamous lineages, yet they persisted in orchestrating kin unions for geopolitical gain. Court healers composed exhaustive expositions on the somatic and psychic maladies afflicting regal progeny, yet these were regarded as medical oddities rather than admonitions concerning hereditary damage. The nexus betwixt consanguinity and ailments was patent to any inclined to observe, but geopolitical and fiscal imperatives invariably superseded human benevolence. The Catholic Church, which might have interceded by withholding sanction for such proximate unions, instead issued dispensations, rendering even the most genetically hazardous alliances licit and ecclesiastically valid. The ecclesiastical stance held that regal lineages were divinely mandated, and that upholding their sanctity eclipsed averting human torment. Even the afflicted females occasionally propagated the regime. Indoctrinated to deem their regal essence superior to that of plebeians, some ardently pursued unions with kin to preserve what they viewed as their hereditary patrimony. They remained oblivious that they abetted their own genetic ruination. The most harrowing facet of this perpetuation is how each cohort of females harbored aspirations that their progeny would differ, that somehow their descendants would elude the hereditary malediction afflicting their kin for centuries. They withstood gestation upon gestation, abortion upon abortion, clinging to forlorn optimism that the ensuing infant would thrive. The Habsburg genetic endeavour ultimately terminated with Charles II of Spain, whose airless demise in 1700 ignited the War of the Spanish Succession. Charles II was so genetically compromised as to be impotent and conceivably intellectually impaired, the conclusive, sorrowful terminus of centuries of consanguinity. His passing signified not merely the cessation of the Spanish Habsburg branch, but the inception of a gradual acknowledgement that regal endogamy was untenable. Whilst kin unions persisted amongst European nobility, they diminished in frequency and proximity as tribunals commenced apprehending the hereditary perils. The females whose chronicles we have traversed were casualties of a regime that prioritized geopolitical convenience over human welfare, genetic sanctity over genetic vitality. They endured and perished not from individual shortcomings or celestial disfavor, but because their forebears opted for ephemeral geopolitical leverage over enduring hereditary ramifications. Their bequest encompasses not solely the archival testimony of their torment, but the scientific enlightenment derived from scrutinizing their plight. Contemporary genetics is indebted profoundly to the tragic Habsburg venture in consanguinity. Their anguish advanced our comprehension of allelic mechanics and the imperative of genetic heterogeneity for human vitality. Though regal consanguinity of this magnitude is largely antiquated, the dynamics that engendered these calamities persist in variant guises. Secluded societies globally yet practice kin marriage, frequently with analogous hereditary sequelae. The elemental conflict betwixt conserving cultural legacies and safeguarding genetic vitality endures in diverse arenas. More expansively, these chronicles admonish us of the perils in regarding individuals as instruments toward objectives rather than as beings meriting dignity and volition. The Habsburg females were diminished to their propagative role, esteemed solely for engendering male successors and perpetuating lineages. Their personal necessities, aspirations, and welfare were subordinate to geopolitical deliberations. This dehumanization is not peculiar to bygone regal tribunals. Across annals and persisting contemporarily, females have been reduced to their fecund capacity, their merit gauged by child production for others' benefit. The Habsburg tragedy constitutes an extremity of a motif that endures worldwide in sundry manifestations. As we approach the denouement of these sorrowful chronicles, we must confront a disquieting verity. The torment of these females served a function, albeit not that envisaged by their oppressors. Their anguish, inscribed in tribunal archives and medical tomes, furnished pivotal evidence for modern genetics evolution. The Habsburg genetic endeavor, appalling as it proved for its participants, bestowed science priceless insights into consanguinity's ramifications. Contemporary grasp of recessive alleles, genetic heterogeneity, and hereditary malady motifs evolved partly from examining the lamentable outcomes of regal kin unions. This neither vindicates their torment nor mitigates the atrocity of their ordeals, but it signifies that their pain harbored meaning. The erudition gleaned from their affliction has averted analogous calamities and enriched human genetic comprehension. The females we have contemplated: Maria Anna of Austria, Joanna of Castile, Margaret Theresa of Spain, Anna of Austria, Marie Antoinette, and the overlooked Spanish Infantas, were authentic individuals who navigated genuine existences rife with veritable anguish. They transcended mere historical annotations or genetic exemplars. They were daughters, consorts, matriarchs, and human entities who merited superior destinies than those conspired by heredity and geopolitics. Their chronicles serve as a memento of the primacy of human benevolence over geopolitical pragmatism, of acknowledging each person's inherent dignity irrespective of station, and of comprehending that even the mightiest establishments can propagate immense torment when they forsake fundamental human tenets. Rejoin me now in that instant of dreadful epiphany we evoked at the outset, awakening to discern that your entire trajectory has been sculpted by prenatal decrees, by antecedents who esteemed lineage sanctity above human benevolence. For the females whose chronicles we have probed, this was no fantasy but quotidian verity. They subsisted with the awareness that their somatic agony, psychic torment, propagative lapses, and societal seclusion all emanated from the identical fount, a hereditary patrimony corrupted by eras of consanguinity. They bore not merely their own burdens, but the aggregated mass of centuries of ill-conceived choices by those who ought to have discerned wiser. Yet within their anguish, we uncover something sublime regarding human fortitude. Notwithstanding their predicaments, many of these females unearthed avenues to affirm their essence. Maria Anna emerged as a savant, discovering cerebral liberty in a physique that confined her. Joanna preserved her ardent devotion even amid derangement. Margaret Theresa endured her torment with decorum. Anna discovered consolation in devotion. Marie Antoinette confronted demise with valor. Their chronicles admonish us that even amid the bleakest vicissitudes, the human ethos can proclaim its merit. They further remind us of our duty to assimilate from their torment, ensuring that our quests for geopolitical, fiscal, or societal aims never again necessitate the methodical annihilation of human entities. The malediction of lineage sanctity has at last dissipated, at minimum in its most acute incarnations. Yet the reminiscence of these females and their torment endures, a testament to the toll of prioritizing dogma over benevolence, custom over empathy, and dominion over ardor. Ultimately, their bequest is both sorrowful and restorative. Sorrowful, for their torment was avertible. Restorative, for their chronicles have aided in ensuring that such methodical hereditary ruination shall never again be pursued under the banner of regal sanctity. They exacted the supreme levy so that we might assimilate a lesson their antecedents spurned, that human merit cannot be quantified by lineage, and that authentic nobility resides not in genetic sanctity, but in the valor to affirm our shared humanity. Their voices, muted by demise and chronology, yet resound through annals with a straightforward yet profound missive. Commemorate us not for our regal designations or geopolitical import, but as human entities who merited superior fates than those orchestrated by heredity and geopolitics. Commemorate us and assimilate from our torment, that others may be spared the malediction of preserving bloodlines pure